Damaged Defenders by Sherza. Chapter 102. Sam. For having so many people on board, the Quinjet was eerily silent. Also, it had the feel of a powder keg just waiting for the spark it needed to explode. Not at all surprising, given the situation, but still alarming, especially given what these people were capable of. Sam had opted to ride on the Quinjet. He had his wings back, yes, but he'd never flown over an entire ocean with them. They had the capacity to go that kind of distance, but he and the others in the program had always deployed from the U.S. military base nearest the folks needing to be rescued, and more rarely from a plane when the rescuees were too far behind enemy lines to make deployment from a base practical. Now was not the time to find out if he could handle flying that sort of distance and still be fighting ready at the other end. Barton and Romanov were in the cockpit flying them. Both of them, like everyone else, were armed for bear. Barton had about a dozen quivers with who knew what sort of arrows stacked in a corner. No bets on whether he had other stuff hidden on him. Romanov had no less than 4 guns, and he didn't even want to know what else she was hiding on her. She also had some weird thick cuff things on her wrist that Sam figured were bad news, even if he had no idea what they did. Both Barnes and Rogers had howitzers. Okay, not really, but Stark had given them both enormous guns that bore an uncanny resemblance to an M41A pulse rifle as seen in Aliens. Sam had never seen anything like it in the service. Given they were working with Stark, Sam would absolutely not put it past the man to have worked out how to make a fake movie gun a reality for shits and giggles. As big as they were, the recoil, especially in grenade mode, was probably enough to put stress fractures in bones in most folks, which would explain why it had never gone into full production. Rogers and Barnes were on a very short list of people who could handle that sort of recoil without a problem. Sam figured that Rogers' comfort level with guns would freak a lot of people out. There was a hysterically funny and kind of horrifying at the same time perception in certain circles that Rogers had never used anything but his shield during the war. Sam had never quite been sure why people thought that, because anyone going into a war zone with only a shield and no means of offense was going to get very dead very quickly. And yes, the shield was sort of an offensive weapon the way Rogers flung it around, but even with souped up strength, his range with the shield was pretty limited. Stark had offered guns to everyone else. Sam had been the only one to take him up on the offer, choosing a pair of M9A1s for their familiarity. Stark had happily handed them over with what amounted to a fanny pack full of clips, enough to keep Sam in ammo for the fight. He hoped. Sam had also had just enough time to collaborate with Dr. Reyes to make sure they had a decent medical kit aboard the jet just in case, and Dr. Reyes on standby just in case someone got hurt worse than a field kit could handle. This being a Stark operation, the medical kit was more than decent. Given the look Rogers had been sporting since he'd been filled in, and the way everyone's been jumping at the bit to kick Hydra ass, Sam had decided to call it a win when Stark and Thor paced the jet rather than flew ahead to kick some preemptive ass. They could both get there a lot faster than the jet could. Not that Barton and Romanov were exactly driving in the slow lane, but a Quinjet could only go so fast. Then they were in Bavarian airspace, and Sam gave the silent jet a wave before tumbling out the back with an exuberant whoop. The circumstances were for crazy, but that was not going to make Sam love flying like this any less. Being back in the sky was awesome. He let himself tumble well clear of the jet before he straightened out into a dive and butt the wings, rocketing skyward again on a graceful curve as he momentarily had to play chase the jet to catch up. It didn't take long before he was pacing the jet along with Thor and Stark. A laugh came through his comm. "Come on, bird brain, let's see what you got." Of course, Stark would egg him on. Sam's side slipped closer, and Sam didn't need to be able to see his face to see the smirk. "Man, just because that tin can of yours can go Mach speeds, you think we're the shits." Sam heckled right back. "Let me tell you, Stark, speed ain't everything." Sam was never going to tell Stark, of course, that he thought the suit actually was the shit. A little on the eye-catching side with Stark's preference and colors, but otherwise pretty much the epitome of awesome. They trash-talked back and forth for a few minutes, but then the castle came in sight, and anything even remotely resembling humor disappeared like smoke on the wind. Thor, as planned, went high. He was the one with the infinite and really heavy-duty ammo in the form of lightning. He would primarily deal with any big stuff and, of course, help with the final destruction of the place. Otherwise, he was taking Barton's apparently usual place as a pie. Stark took the mid-level. He had some pretty high-yield and long-range toys, but those toys had extremely limited ammo. His repulsors, while weaker, relatively speaking, they still packed more of a punch than the average gun, had an essentially unlimited number of shots. The trade-off being that the repulsor's range was more limited than the high-yield toys, so he had to be a bit closer to the action. Sam got the deck level. His effective range with his guns was about 150 feet, so we needed to be pretty close to his targets, relatively speaking. He'd also be mostly concentrating on people, rather than punching holes in walls, knocking down doors, or smooshing any vehicles or the like that came out to play. Part of them flinched a little at killing people rather than saving them. Then he reminded himself who these particular people were and the sorts of crap they had done. After that, he stopped having a problem with gapping their asses. Also, as planned, Stark zipped through the security measures surrounding the castle and started blowing them up. Sam followed on behind, staying low. It didn't take long for people to start boiling out of the castle with various weapons, trying to get a bead on Stark. Because everyone was focused on that bright and shiny red and gold armor, they generally didn't notice the matte gray and black, despite there being quite long wings involved, clad Sam until it was way too late. Then most of the rest of the Avengers came boiling through the hole Stark and Sam had opened in the castle's security perimeter. No sign of Loki, Barton, or Romanov, but one of that triad could teleport, a second had made a career out of not being noticed, and the third was a sniper, so it really wasn't surprising. And that's when the screaming started. Before then, it had mostly been shouting of orders, with the odd startled and pained scream thrown in as someone got hit in a way that didn't result in instantly getting death. Apparently, if you're Hydra, the combination of a murder-faced Captain America and a masked Winter Soldier coming at you guns blazing was pants-sweatingly terrified. Poor Pyro was practically an afterthought to everyone, though he was doing his fair share of damage. Sam didn't blame them a bit for that. He wasn't even in their direct line of sight, never mind being someone they were targeting, and the way the two of them were fighting was making him want to run for cover. It was almost funny, the way people scrambled to get out of their line of fire, preferring to die on Wolverine's claws or at the hands of nearly anyone else than face that pair. Then the gang was in the castle and Sam lost sight of them. He could still hear them over the comms, along with a lot of terrified and pain screaming, and the odd shout of something that wasn't pain or fear. The third time that happened, he heard a rusty, spine-chilling giggle he was pretty sure was Barnes, followed by something that had the cadence of a taunt in the same language. Which was when Sam realized those occasional shouts were probably attempts at getting the Winter Soldier back under Hydra control. Tough luck, guys. Also, way to make sure you got extra dead. Sam didn't even need to see what was going on to know that Rogers at least would be all too happy to put a bullet in those people's brains. Most of the rest of the Avengers too. Though some, like Romanov and Logan, possibly Loki too, might want to hurt the assholes for a while first in retribution. At that point though, the tanks and really nasty guns, shooting blue stuff, what the heck, came out. Stark yelped something about shooting that blue stuff at me in what had to be a riff on the quote from Independence Day, which got a very alarmed sounding shout from Rogers. Do not, I repeat, do not let them shoot you with those. They're the same thing they use in the war. They'll disintegrate you even if they only clip you. Roger that, Cap, Stark said. Then, you are the man, Jarvis. Let's start the eat up. Sam, wisely, got the heck out of Dodge, swinging wide around the castle, away from Stark and whatever he was about to do. He stayed as low as the wings would let him, using Hydra's own people as shields as much as he could against the blue energy guns. Hydra hadn't hesitated about shooting in the direction of their own people with the normal guns, but they were noticeably less eager to do so with the blue energy ones, which was all the proof Sam needed that Rogers was right about those guns. Seconds after he got the bulk of the castle between him and Stark, the comms abruptly cut off, and there was a bright white flash of light. Then the comms cut back in. Whatever the heck that had been, the sound of shooting from that side of the castle all but stopped. When Sam swooped back around, about 3/4 of the Hydra goons were laid out flat on the ground. They were all still alive and breathing, but it didn't look like they could move. "Stark, what the heck was that?" Sam asked. "Oral paralyzer," Stark said in a very, very, very worrying tone of voice. "With a flash grenade appetizer to distract them. They won't be able to move for about 10 minutes, give or take." Sam made due mental note to poke at Stark about that later because that tone of voice was extremely worrying. For now, he settled for landing and started to frisk the nearest disabled goons prior to hog-tying them while Stark took out the last of the gunners. At least there hadn't actually been any tanks or the like. Sam hoped. At least he assumed such would have been thrown at them by now. "Don't forget to check their teeth," Stark said in a more normal tone of voice. Relatively speaking, he still sounded off, like he was playing at being fine, rather than actually being fine. "Right, cyanide teeth. Idiots," Sam snarked, even as he pried the mouth of the goon he was frisking open and started knocking at the idiot's teeth. "Well, probably not cyanide these days," Stark said. "It's not all that reliable as a method of offing yourself, despite what the movies like to pretend. They probably came up with something better if they stuck with the tooth thing." Sam didn't find any loose teeth. That didn't mean there wasn't a suicide tooth, just that the thing was securely enough anchored not to give under a gentle knock from a knuckle. "You've got the snazzy tech. Come over here and make sure this guy's clean in the tooth department," Sam said, as much because he wanted eyes on Stark after the way he'd sounded talking about the paralyzer as anything else. Stark flew over and landed. A few seconds later, he spoke up. "Jarvis says he's clear." "Yeah." "All right, let's get the rest of these assholes trussed up before they get any bright ideas," Sam said. Stark griped, but fell in easily enough. After about 10 minutes, he even started sounding more like himself. Once they'd gotten the paralyzed goons stacked up like cordwood near the security perimeter, they sat back and listened to the mayhem going on in the castle proper. Stark stayed on his toes, ready to fly in and help shoot the place and people up if he was needed, but from what they were hearing over the comms, the other Avengers had it more than handled. Some of what they were hearing was even amusing. Loki had apparently taken Rogers' directive to hit from the shadows as permission to be a little shit. A vicious, homicidal shit, but a little shit. He had, among other things, very probably, apparently commandeered some of the dead Hydra goons and was animating them like they were zombies. Complete with the zombies biting other Hydra goons and infecting them, which was freaking the rest of the Hydra goons out and cracking up most of the Avengers.